First contact chaos. The Galactic Accord had existed for over 12,000 years. 27 species, all of whom had achieved spaceflight through careful, methodical progress spanning millennia. Each member race had followed the same fundamental pattern. Centuries of observation, mathematical models refined over generations, and finally, tentative steps into the void only after exhaustive safety protocols were established. Then they met humans. Ambassador Therax of the Vessi Confederation still remembered the day the peculiar vessels appeared at the edge of the Proxima system. Their ships were a hodgepodge of technology, some advanced, some primitive, all somehow functioning together in what his engineers later described as a miracle of questionable engineering. They're approaching at remarkable speed, his first officer had reported, mandibles clicking with concern. Their propulsion system appears to be... Wait, that can't be right. What is it? Therax had asked. According to our scans, they're using controlled nuclear explosions to propel themselves forward. Therax had laughed then. The idea was absurd. No species would be insane enough to ride nuclear detonations through space. He had never been so wrong. The first transmission came minutes later. Not in the standard mathematical sequences used for first contacts throughout the galaxy, but in something called English. More surprising was the tone, casual, almost friendly, as though they were meeting old acquaintances rather than potential threats from the stars. Hey there, Proxima neighbors. This is Captain Elena Martins of the Earth vessel Horizon. Hope we didn't startle you showing up like this. We've been trying to find someone to talk to out here for ages. Got any coffee? The Galactic Accord's First Contact Protocol Handbook, a document spanning 42 volumes, had no provision for dealing with a species that treated interstellar diplomacy with the casual approach of someone stopping by a neighbor's house. That first meeting became legendary. The humans arrived not with ceremonial gifts or diplomatic dossiers, but with what they called movie night essentials: popcorn, various beverages, and digital recordings of their entertainment. Ambassador Therax still couldn't decide if it was genius or madness. Perhaps both. You're telling me, Captain Martinez had said, while consuming her third cup of what she called coffee, that most species take thousands of years to develop space travel. That explains why the neighborhood seems so quiet. How long did humans take? Therax had asked, already dreading the answer. Well, we went from our first powered flight to landing on our moon in 66 years. Then we got distracted for a bit. Space race kinda cooled down when the Cold War ended. But once we got the private sector involved, things picked up again. The Vessi diplomatic team had to take a recess after that revelation. Several members needed medical attention for shock. The most concerning aspect wasn't humanity's reckless speed. It was their troubling approach to problem solving. During what was supposed to be a formal cultural exchange, the humans demonstrated their trial and error methodology by attempting to repair a malfunctioning Vessi atmospheric regulator. This looks like a compressor issue, one of their engineers had said, casually dismantling a piece of equipment that had taken Vessi scientists decades to perfect. Mind if I try something? Before anyone could object, the human had reconfigured the device using parts from her own breathing apparatus and what appeared to be adhesive from her pocket. The device not only functioned again, but operated at 118% of its original efficiency. When asked how she knew this would work, the engineer shrugged and said, I didn't, but it looked like it might. This incident led to the formation of the Human Monitoring Committee, a decision that would prove both wise and insufficient. The accidental alliance occurred 3 standard months after first contact. A human transport vessel, lost and running low on fuel, stumbled into Draculan territory, a hostile species that had resisted all Accord diplomatic efforts for centuries. Instead of surrendering or retreating, the humans initiated what they called an impromptu cultural festival. They broadcast music across all frequencies, sent invitations to their space party, and somehow convinced the militaristic Draculan that this was a sophisticated diplomatic ritual. The Dracolan, not wanting to appear culturally insensitive, participated. What followed was 3 days of what humans termed the biggest bash this side of the galaxy. By the end, the Dracolan Empire had not only signed a peace treaty with humans, but had also adopted several human customs, including something called Casual Fridays. More concerning was the impossible rescue of the Heliox mining colony. When the planet's core became unstable, conventional wisdom dictated evacuation. The 9,000 inhabitants faced certain death as the planetary crust began to fracture. The nearest Accord rescue vessels were 4 days away. A single human ship, a retrofitted cargo hauler, responded to the distress call. With no specialized rescue equipment and insufficient capacity to evacuate even a fraction of the colonists, the logical conclusion was that their gesture, while noble, would be futile. Captain Shenhui of the Earth vessel Prosperity disagreed. "The way I see it," he transmitted to Accord emergency response, "we don't need to move the people off the planet. We just need to stabilize the planet until your ships arrive." The emergency response coordinator, a Telleran with 4 advanced degrees in planetary science, tried to explain the mathematical impossibility of what Captain Shen was suggesting. The human's response was recorded in the Accord archives. "Math is more of a guideline than a rule where I come from." What followed defied explanation. The human vessel positioned itself above the most unstable tectonic plate and deployed what they called a modified mining rig. Using principles that somehow combined outdated drilling technology with experimental gravity manipulation, they managed to release pressure along the fracture lines in controlled bursts. When that proved insufficient, Captain Shen ordered his crew to repurpose their ship's drive system, essentially turning their vessel into an improvised tectonic stabilizer. The maneuver had an estimated 97% chance of catastrophic failure, according to Accord simulations. It worked. When questioned afterward about the reckless endangerment of his vessel and crew, Captain Shen seemed genuinely confused. "What were we supposed to do? Just watch them die, because the math said it was hopeless? That's not how we do things." The Heliox incident sparked serious debate within the Accord Council. On one hand, all 9,000 colonists survived what should have been certain death. On the other, the humans had violated 16 different safety protocols and essentially improvised a solution to a complex planetary crisis based on what one crew member described as a hunch and some educated guesswork. Elder Morith of the Galatian Consensus summarized the growing sentiment. "They are either the most brilliant or the most dangerous species we have encountered, possibly both. They do not seem to understand the concept of impossibility, which makes their potential actions impossible to predict." The classification debate lasted weeks. Were humans an advanced species who simply approached problems differently? Or were they technological infants whose reckless approach to the universe would eventually spell disaster for all? The debate became moot when humans demonstrated their unique approach to galactic economics. It began with what the galactic community now refers to as the Great Misunderstanding. But what humans called, "that time we convinced the galaxy that memes were currency." Human diplomats, attempting to explain the concept of social media influence to the Galactic Economic Council, created the impression that these memes represented an actual form of currency. Before the misunderstanding could be corrected, several species had begun collecting and trading what they believed were valuable human cultural artifacts. Rather than clarify the confusion, humans leveraged this misunderstanding into actual economic power. They established a market for digital content, cultural references, and entertainment that quickly spread across 17 systems. By the time the Council realized their mistake, humans had established themselves as the galaxy's primary exporters of cultural content. "We didn't exactly lie," explained human economic attaché Priya Sharma. "Influence does have value. We just didn't expect everyone to take it so literally." This incident led to the formation of a new Accord classification, unpredictably advantageous species, a designation previously thought to be a logical impossibility. The final incident that cemented humanity's unique status came when a human research vessel encountered the ancient T-Very light beings at the edge of known space. The T-Very, composed of sentient photonic matter, had observed the galaxy for millions of years, but rarely interacted with physical species. When asked why they had chosen to establish communication with humans specifically, the T-Very response was translated as, "You are the only ones who asked why not. Instead of why, your species looks at the impossible and treats it as merely improbable." This approach is rare in a universe bound by laws and limitations. As the first part of human integration into the galactic community concluded, the Accord established what is now known as the Human Proximity Protocol, a recommended minimum distance of 3 star systems between major human settlements and other species' core worlds. Not because humans were hostile, but because their unpredictability was simultaneously their greatest asset and the galaxy's greatest concern. As Ambassador Therax noted in his final report before retirement, they are chaos embodied, yet somehow they make chaos work for them. The universe has rules. Humans have suggestions. The Celestial Crisis. The Celestial Crisis began with a whisper of radiation from the galactic core, subtle enough that only the most sensitive Phalari instruments detected it. Within days, however, the readings were impossible to ignore. Something was happening at the supermassive black hole at the center of the galaxy, something unprecedented in 12,000 years of Accord astronomical records. The black hole was developing what humans would later colorfully term a cosmic hiccup, irregular energy bursts that sent waves of destructive radiation outward through the galaxy. Initial projections by the Accord's Astronomical Council were grim. These radiation pulses would intensify over the coming standard year, eventually rendering nearly 40% of inhabited systems uninhabitable. Evacuation plans were impossible on such a scale. Shielding technology would be overwhelmed. For the first time in its extensive history, the Accord faced an extinction-level event with no viable solution. The Council of Elders convened an emergency session, bringing together the greatest scientific minds from all 27 member species. Conspicuously absent from the initial invitation were human representatives. Their unpredictability is a liability in this situation, argued Elder Jopes of the crystalline taxonomy. We need methodical, tested approaches, not human improvisation. The debate might have continued indefinitely, if not for Ambassador Therax, now serving his final cycle before retirement. With respect, he interrupted, rising from his seat against protocol. Methodical approaches have yielded no viable solutions after 3 full sessions. Perhaps unpredictability is exactly what we need. The vote was close, 14-13, but humanity was invited to join the crisis response team. Dr. Maya Kalinga arrived 12 hours later aboard a small research vessel that appeared to have been modified with technology from at least 4 different species. Her greeting to the council lacked the expected formality. "So I hear the galaxy's having a black hole problem. Mind if I take a look at your data?" The Viridian data analysts, accustomed to months of careful examination before forming hypotheses, watched in horror as Dr. Kalinga scrolled rapidly through terabytes of astronomical information, occasionally muttering to herself or pausing to scribble equations on what appeared to be a disposable beverage container. After just 4 hours, she looked up. "I think I see the issue. Your black hole isn't just emitting radiation, it's resonating." "Resonating?" Elder Morith asked, all 4 of his eyes narrowing. "Black holes do not resonate. They consume." "Normally, yes," Dr. Kalinga agreed. "But this one seems to be caught in some kind of feedback loop with something. The radiation signature has a pattern. It's not random." The revelation sparked a new direction of investigation. While the Accord scientists debated the theoretical possibility of black hole resonance, a concept absent from their astrophysics, Dr. Kalinga was already working on what she called a potential fix. 3 days later, she presented her proposal to the council. "We need to dampen the resonance," she explained, pointing to a holographic model of the galactic core. Think of it like a noise-canceling headphone, but for cosmic radiation. And how would you propose we create a noise-canceling headphone for a supermassive black hole? Asked Chief Scientist Navarro, her tentacles rippling with skepticism. Dr. Kalinga smiled. We create an opposing resonance pattern, the counterwave. The proposal was mathematically sound but practically impossible. To generate a counterwave of sufficient magnitude would require energy equivalent to several stars. Even if such energy could be harnessed, the delivery system would need to approach the event horizon of the black hole itself, a suicide mission. We'll need to borrow some of your quantum entanglement communicators, Dr. Kalinga continued, seemingly oblivious to the practical impossibilities she was proposing, and about 300 small FTL-capable drones. Oh, and permission to temporarily repurpose the Dyson capture array around Helios IV. The Council's reaction ranged from outrage to disbelief. The Helios IV energy array powered nearly a third of the Accord's core systems. The quantum communicators were among their most advanced and classified technology, and approaching the galactic core with drone technology was deemed impossible due to the intense radiation and gravitational forces. Yet, as the radiation pulses intensified and the first outlying systems reported catastrophic atmospheric disruption, the Council found themselves without alternatives. This is unprecedented, Elder Jopik stated. We cannot entrust the fate of the galaxy to an untested theory proposed by a species that has been spacefaring for less than 2 centuries. Ambassador Therax rose again. With respect, Elder, unprecedented problems may require unprecedented solutions. If we await a precedented approach to an unprecedented event, we may not survive to document the results. The Council approved Dr. Kalinga's plan by a single vote. What followed would redefine the Accord's understanding of both black hole physics and human ingenuity. Dr. Kalinga, working with a hastily assembled team from 7 species, reprogrammed the Helios IV array to generate specific energy patterns rather than simply capture stellar output. Meanwhile, the quantum communicators were modified to withstand the intense radiation near the galactic core, a modification that Accord engineers had deemed impossible, but that Dr. Kalinga accomplished by coating the devices with what she described as a polymer we use to protect spacecraft components, plus some modifications I thought might help. The drones, operating in a synchronized swarm controlled through the quantum communicators, would position themselves in a precise formation around the galactic core, each transmitting a portion of the counter-resonance wave. On the day of deployment, Dr. Kalinga addressed the Council one final time. I should note that there's about a 14% chance this could temporarily increase the radiation output before it dampens it. Just, so no one's surprised if that happens. You're telling us now that your solution might initially worsen the catastrophe, Elder Morith demanded. Dr. Kalinga shrugged. Most good solutions have some risk. The alternative is doing nothing, which has a 100% chance of continued disaster. I like our odds better. The drone deployment proceeded despite numerous technical challenges. 3 times, the control systems failed due to radiation interference. Twice, gravitational forces destroyed entire sections of the drone network. Each time, Dr. Kalinga and her team adapted, rerouted, and improvised. When the final drone moved into position and the counter-resonance wave activated, the entire Accord Council held their breath. For 16 tense minutes, nothing happened. Then, as Dr. Kalinga had warned, the radiation levels spiked dramatically. 3 more outlying systems reported atmospheric ignition. Council chambers erupted in panic. Several members called for Dr. Kalinga's immediate arrest for endangering the galaxy. Ambassador Therax alone remained calm, watching the human scientist as she studied the incoming data with intense concentration. "Wait for it," she murmured. "The pattern's shifting. There." As suddenly as it had intensified, the radiation began to diminish. Within hours, levels had dropped below their previous baseline. The black hole's hiccup was resolving. 2 standard days later, astronomical readings confirmed what seemed impossible. The supermassive black hole had stabilized. The crisis that had threatened 40% of inhabited space had been averted through what the Accord scientific community reluctantly termed unconventional methodologies. In the aftermath, Dr. Kalinga was asked to explain how she had conceived of a solution that had eluded the combined scientific expertise of 27 advanced civilizations. "I've had some experience with resonance problems before," she explained. "During my doctoral research, I was studying quantum field harmonics, and I accidentally created a feedback loop that nearly destroyed my university's particle accelerator. This reminded me of that, just on a much bigger scale." "You developed this solution based on a previous failure?" Elder Zopax asked incredulously. "Of course," Dr. Kalinga replied. "Most good solutions come from understanding past mistakes. Trial, error, adaptation, that's the human way." The Council's official report on the celestial crisis recommended a fundamental reassessment of humanity's role in the Accord. While their methods remained unorthodox and frequently alarming, their capacity to conceptualize solutions outside established parameters had saved countless lives. The Human Proximity Protocol was amended, not to increase the recommended distance between human settlements and other species, but to ensure that at least one human scientific outpost existed within communication range of each major Accord population center. As Elder Morith explained in the amended protocol, "Their chaos remains concerning, but we now recognize it as a fundamental aspect of their problem-solving approach. They do not simply think outside conventional boundaries. They appear unaware that such boundaries exist at all." Ambassador Therax, in his final act before retirement, established what would become known as the Human Consultation Directive, a mandate that any crisis deemed unsolvable by conventional means must include human advisors in the response team. "They remain the most unpredictable species we have encountered," he noted in his final address. "This unpredictability is what makes them both valuable and, yes, frightening. They approach the impossible not with resignation but with curiosity. They see laws of physics not as immutable truths but as challenges to overcome. And most concerning of all, they succeed often enough to justify their approach." As humanity continued to expand into the galaxy, establishing colonies and research outposts at a pace that alarmed traditional Accord members, the recommended safe distance continued to increase, not out of fear of human aggression, but out of respect for their chaotic innovation. The final amendment to the Human Proximity Protocol perhaps best summarized the galaxy's complex relationship with its newest spacefaring species. Maintain sufficient distance to avoid being caught in the initial failure of human experimental approaches, but remain close enough to benefit from their eventual improbable successes. In time, humanity's reputation evolved from frightening unpredictability to respected unconventionality. They became the species you called when conventional wisdom failed, the chaotic element that could disrupt any problem to its fundamental components and reassemble it into something workable, if inelegant. As one Filari philosopher noted, most species advance by building upon what is known. Humans advance by questioning why we believe we know it at all. The galaxy had encountered many species throughout its long history: methodical builders, harmonious cooperators, hive-mind collectives. But none had challenged the fundamental assumptions of galactic civilization, like humans with their casual disregard for impossibility. They remained, as Ambassador Therax had first described them, chaos embodied. But the galaxy had learned that sometimes, when facing the truly unprecedented, chaos was exactly what was needed.